Well, good evening, everyone. I'll welcome you all to the March 2025 meeting of the Davis Police Accountability Commission. I'll call the meeting to order at a minute earlier than I thought I would at 6:36. And we'll go through the role, I guess, of the folks who are here. Starting from my right, Commissioner Bliss, Vice Chair Wilson, Commissioner Sherman,
Here.
Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald.
Present.
Okay, thank you. And it's my understanding that Commissioner Canning will be joining us in a second here, and I believe we'll probably, as former Vice Chair Griswold is getting through Sacramento traffic, she'll be joining us in a second here too. Okay, let's see. Does anyone want to make a motion for approval of tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this evening's agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, agenda approved. Brief announcements from city staff. We have our illustrious city manager joining us this evening. Kelly, take it away.
Well, still the assistant city manager. But that actually does feed nicely into the announcement that I wanted to make. I did send you guys the press release. You probably know by now that Mike Webb will be leaving us at the end of this month as city manager, but we're fortunate to retain him in Yolo County. He'll be be the county administrative officer starting March 31st. So he will be leaving the city. I have been appointed the interim city manager once he leaves, so not tonight. But with that additional responsibility, we're working to switch around different assignments that I have. So this will be my last meeting with the PAC for a while, is my assumption. I don't know yet who will be staffing the PAC, but I will certainly let you guys know that as soon as we figure all of, cross all those T's and dot all those I's. So the goal would be to have a smooth transition all around, including the change in staffing to this commission. And I won't be far away if there are questions or issues. So just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. I think that's the major announcement for the moment. The one other additional thing for the council meeting, there's a council meeting tomorrow evening, and the item that you had before you in January about the automated license plate readers and the request to add additional readers potentially through a grant that the city is interested in applying for, that will be on the council calendar tomorrow evening. And when I say on the council calendar, it is not that we're actually getting those pieces of equipment, but this is the part of the process for the surveillance technology ordinance that if we want to add things, this is basically the permission, seeking the permission from the council to even apply for the grant. And we'll see where it goes from there. The grant is federal dollars, so we don't know. We don't know what we don't know where that's concerned. But just to let you know that that's the next step in that process, and the PAC had weighed in on that at the January meeting.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and put in my sort of nomination for Carrie, pending sort of staff availability. Carrie, who previously, when there was two of y'all working with us back in the early days of the Police Accountability Commission, I think, pending staff availability, hopefully, and then there's Commissioner Canning and Councilmember Partita. But I know she has some familiarity with the proceedings, and the comings and goings of the Police Accountability Commission has sometimes been at our outreach events and other things, sort of helping us out. And so I feel like she will, talking about a seamless transition, she would be probably the most seamless in terms of a different staff member joining us here. Any questions for Kelly? Go ahead.
Yeah, not a question. I just wanted to say congratulations on your interim position, Kelly.
Thank you.
Any other questions or congratulatories? Okay. So I'll take this opportunity for commissioner announcements to do what I usually do, is to point to our sort of monthly observances. But, of course, well, actually, I'll point to, as I was talking with Vice Chair, some vegetable pakora if any of my commission colleagues are interested up here. But we of course we didn't have a meeting last month because it was during the time that we did our outreach event, which we'll discuss later on in this evening's agenda. But of course, last month was Black History Month. This month is, of course, a Women's History Month. And I'm glad Councilmember Partita just joined us because, of course, she is one of our she is a woman, as Commissioner Canning points out. But our first Latina mayor and our first Latina council member, as many of us are aware. And as Kelly was noting in her staff announcements, we have later on in this month when the transition occurs, her being elevated to the interim position. But of course, we know that Kelly's been working with us for a long time here now on the Police Accountability Commission, and we're very glad to have her service with us. This month it's almost exactly aligned with the holy month of Ramadan, excuse me. And I know many Davisites are observing that, including the lovely Pakistani food truck where I got this vegetable pakora from earlier this evening. I know later on I was searching for it on the city social media, but it doesn't seem like it's been posted yet. But I know that the city will be hosting a Chavez celebration at some point around Chavez Day. And so I know many commission members, including the two who've been former Human Relations Commission members, will probably be there. I'll probably be there as well. But sort of in a slightly related note, I know that there's a lot of concern about Latino cultural events that might take place in the community, particularly given just the national climate overall with regard to, the technical term is immigration enforcement, but that almost sounds like a euphemism at this point. And particularly the events of the last little while in our community in that area. I'll just reiterate, as I was, sort of saying to some folks before the meeting started, as we discussed in our December meeting when the chief was here, sort of in his first formal presentation, and again when he was with us in January, that there's no per state law collaboration between the police department and any immigration enforcement authorities, but also I think as the chief outlined in our December meeting, really broadly federal law enforcement authorities, except for in very sort of particular circumstances. So I think people should be aware of that. I think there was, I had a conversation shortly after that pickup incident that, someone was like, well, can I call police if I'm, sort of concerned about that, and everyone's going to have to figure out how to navigate those things themselves. I know that there's sort of regional groups like NorCal Resist who are operating sort of information sharing networks. And, I think there's a little bit of a conversation of how to better integrate that here in Yolo County and in Davis so that folks in our community can make that available to us. Anyway, so I just wanted to reiterate what had been previously mentioned in some of our previous meetings, that there isn't local law enforcement collaboration with federal immigration enforcement authorities, but also the broad variety of federal law enforcement authorities as well. Other commissioner announcements, council liaison announcements.
I don't have any announcements, but I think that in these times, communication is going to be really important. And I know that in the past, even before we were in the state that we are now, whenever there were like DUI checkpoints and things like that, it often, raised alarm in the community about, that potentially being an ICE activity when it was not. And so I think making sure that our police department and the city puts out good information when those things are happening and around any sort of police activity that could be misconstrued for ICE activity. I think it's going to be really important that we as commissioners and as citizens make sure that we are putting out accurate information.
Yes, thank you. Anything further? Go ahead.
Just one quick thing. You mentioned the Cities Javas event. It will actually be April 26th, a little bit later in the month. But we do that primarily because the school district and UC Davis have spring break that usually coincides with it. So
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please attend. Usually a good time. Let's see. So that moves us to our general public comment. And I'll say to our friends from community and regional development, feel free to participate in public comment to ask questions or share thoughts with us. But this would be general public comment. So for items not on our agenda, or if you imagine there's something later on our agenda that you won't be able to stay for, you can share those thoughts with us now. But I'll open up to general public comment. If folks have that, go ahead.
Yes. You've probably been watching it the last couple of weeks, sure. It's the headlines in the Enterprise about the woman who was killed in Slide Hill Park and the jury trial and the settlement of $24.3 million, which is a very large settlement. And in the midst of that trial, the city attempted to put some of the blame on a consultant that hired. They didn't tell the city that about the problem with the tree. The city paid them to do a 2 or 3 minute look at every tree in the city and claimed that during that, they were supposed to catch problems. But the city that lost, the city took full liability. The city didn't basically take liability until the week before the trial. They basically deferred, said things were okay for 4 years. Some people think when trees fall, that's an act of God. Well, trees always fail eventually. The job of an urban forester is to stay ahead of it and to proactively prune the trees, watch the trees, inspect them, and prune off the limbs before they fall. That's the job of an urban forester versus the forester out in the woods. We failed that. We failed to keep our parks safe. And this was totally foreseeable. Because I've given you this article from 2012, the Tree Commission basically called uncle. This is not okay. And if you've been paying attention, going to city council, you've noticed there have been complaints about the tree program for 13, 14 years. The inadequate funding, the inadequate support. We could see that the arborist was failing. He's gone now. We have a new arborist. Now we're throwing more money at the problem. But it's a little bit like you have a chauffeur and he basically cut corners and started driving the car on bald tires. And finally the car has an accident and there's a big damage. And the chauffeur says, okay, we fired the mechanic and we bought new tires. I would suggest the problem is the management of the system and the fact that the city did not listen to this community. In fact, they slowly degraded the Tree Commission. So the Tree Commission didn't get any budget information. The Tree Commission submitted 3 revisions to the tree protection ordinance. They all ignored. Hundreds of hours of citizens' time were ignored. The city management did not want to listen to the community. And I'm saying you guys need to be on it. Look at the city, be the watchdog. We need that. Deliver the inconvenient truths. I know a lot of cities in the world have been, in the country have been hit with large damages for police shootings. You guys have an important job to do as an watchdog. And I urge you to basically also, if you have a chance, lobby for the return of the Tree Commission, because the city ended the Tree Commission, ended it. Just as we needed more review of our tree program, the city ended it. They cut this public comment time. They eliminated my ability to show PowerPoint slides that point out tree problems. I don't understand what's going on. This is not getting citizen participation. This is eliminating accountability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other further general public comment? Okay, we'll move it back to our consent calendar. Anyone want to make a motion for the approval of our January 2025 minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion of our January minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? All right, minutes are approved. And now that takes us to item 6, our independent police auditor update. We have Mr. Connolly with us this evening to enlighten us as to all of the Oh, yes, there we go. Mr. Connolly and Mike Janako with us this evening to share with us the updates from their work. Take it away, Mike and Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you all. It's been a little bit with the month hiatus, so just to update you on issues of within our realm. You can see that we have a log that we presented to you all, part of your packet. You'll see there is a few other cases that have made it onto the log. In particular, there are 4 uses of tasers that we received the materials on and will be reporting out. We also have completed our review of 2 of the complaint investigations that are on the log. And we have another 2 with the chief right now who's reviewing the write-ups for 2 more. I expect that in April, we'll be able to present and comment on those 4 cases. We may have more completed by then as well. And if so, we'll be talking about them at your April meeting. With regard to sort of, I often talk about sort of the larger issues in policing during this time. 2 things that are definitely bubbling up, and I'm not sure how local law enforcement is going to be dealing with these issues. But one of them has to do with the elimination of the term and the concept of diversity, equity, inclusion. Also the pushback and the messaging to local law enforcement about how bias-based policing and bias in policing is no longer a thing that they should be concerned about or worried about. If they continue to be worried about it, it may impact federal grants and federal money that comes the way of the police department in the cities. Colleges and college towns are struggling with how to respond to the executive order. At USC, some enterprising person scrubbed USC's entire website of the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion, believing that was necessary in order to satisfy the executive order. Other college campuses have not been so aggressive in responding. I had a chance to look at UC Davis's website, and they do not believe that DEI is a swear word, at least not yet. And all of that references to their classes and to their concepts and to their support of the concept is still on UC Davis's website. With regard to immigration enforcement, that is another issue that local law enforcement is having a hard time figuring out how to address. So the conundrum is, what does a chief do when he or she learns that there is going to be ICE enforcement activity in the city? Some chiefs that I've talked to have said, well, I'm going to bury my head in the sand and not take any calls and pretend that it's not happening. Others are not sure that that's the right approach. Generally speaking, when another law enforcement agency comes in to do a major operation, there is communication and at times collaboration. But with California state law being what it is, there cannot be any collaboration for most operations. So then the question is, what about communication? And if so, what does that look like? What many chiefs are worried about is that if they communicate with ICE, that can be perceived by the community as collaboration. There's another percentage of chiefs who think, well, if we don't communicate with ICE, and there's an operation that we don't even know about that's going on in the city, and things go south, what are we to do about it? Particularly concerned about situations where law enforcement gets in the way of law enforcement to a bad degree because they don't know law enforcement is in the city. So those issues are to be worked out. I'm not sure how effectively they're going to be worked out, but it just shows some of the real difficult issues that local law enforcement is going to have to deal with, not only in your city, but throughout the state of California and the nation. I'll stop with my sort of provocative comments at this point, but certainly willing to take any questions.
We certainly welcome your provocative commentary, Mike. I have a couple of questions. I think I just heard from Vice Chair Wilson that she has some as well. This first one, I'm not sure if this one is a question for you, Mike, or Kelly, or Councilmember Partita, or maybe someone up here on the dais. You know, most local law enforcement agencies receive at least some degree of COPS funding, you know, community-oriented policing funding from the Department of Justice. I'm wondering if the Davis Police Department is, like most, a recipient of some of that funding? Okay. Seeing a head nod, you know, just for the recording. Yeah, I'm seeing a head nod from Kelly. Yeah, I guess that, you know, gives me some, you know, I had some concern, and we talked about this a little bit with the chief when he was with us in December about how, as you discussed, Mike, you know, how state law, you know, really doesn't provide a whole lot of discretion, but, you know, it really kind of lays out for local departments that they can't really have this collaboration with federal immigration enforcement. But I hadn't even really thought about how the sort of changing federal DEI policies and sort of, you know, using grant funding coercively to sort of force that upon localities, how that might affect Davis and some of the Homeland Security or DOJ funding that we might get. So that's it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But then I guess you know, in addition to the issues that you brought up, Mike, with regard to what communication a local department has with ICE, I think the thing that was foremost in my mind, particularly given how Homeland Security moved to prosecute some of the media outlets that they had embedded with some of their groups and some of the early enforcement actions in the first couple of weeks of the administration. And then, you know, because they were embedded, some of the media outlets decided to, and God bless them, you know, share that information with some of the local communities. And then they were like, oh, you're interfering with local law enforcement. And so, you know, the line of what you do with that information, because I think the point that you bring up in terms of, oh, hey, say DPD takes a policy of, hey, we're not, you know, to avoid the appearance of collaboration, we're not even going to communicate with immigration enforcement as to whether or not they might be in the community. Then some sort of, because we don't know that they're there, some sort of incident occurs. Deconflicting against that could also kind of present some other sort of, you know, challenges in terms of how do they use that information, and how does Homeland Security try to crack down on even a legitimate, you know, department's use of that information to keep their citizens and their own, you know, officers safe. And so I that almost isn't even really a question, but it's just another aspect of that communication issue that is going to be difficult for the department to navigate. Vice Chair Wilson.
So what I thought I heard you say is if they let them know they're here. So in other words, if ICE comes in, they don't have to inform anybody that they're here. They can just show up.
Yep, they can just show up. If I was a team of ICE agents, I would want to let the local law enforcement know that I was planning an operation. But these days, as Dylan indicated, there's some concern that that information could then get leaked, which would make the operation less successful. So who knows what they're going to do. It's just a lot of uncertainty. And I think we're going to be in a situation where local law enforcement is going to be reacting, which is not a good way to carry out public safety.
Kind of the problem of law enforcement that we're here as a commission to try to correct that the reactionary nature of it. It's definitely not on our best foot. Other questions for Mike? Okay, I'll move to or open up an opportunity for public comment on the independent police auditor update. If not, we'll take it one last opportunity back to my commission colleagues. If not, I will thank Stephen and Mike for their service, and we'll move on to our regular item 7A, which, as Kelly was previewing for us earlier, we had a different version of a couple of months ago, I think in January, where we saw this the first time. I don't know if Kelly, if there was an update beyond what you said in your staff update that you wanted to give.
I'm looking at the agenda and I'm seeing that it's not quite adequately described. This is supposed to be the surveillance technology, the initial review, for the information that you get initially for the annual review. And so the title is correct, surveillance technology. The description is a little bit off. It's not just the public safety cameras, but this is the informational for all of the different surveillance technology. So apologies for that. That said, it's still fine to talk about because it's informational this evening. Are you okay if I just give an overview?
Yes.
Okay. So in your packets, you have the you have a short staff report and the chart. You've seen a similar version of the chart in past years. This is the first bit of information for the annual review that the PAC engages in. You don't have to do anything with this tonight, but you can certainly ask questions or if you are looking for additional or different information. The idea is that at your April meeting or potentially your May meeting, you would come back with any of your comments or input, review that we would then share with the City Council as they do their annual review and approval for use of surveillance technology going into the next year. So they will do that at the first meeting in June. Don't ask me the date, but it's whatever the first meeting is. And so that the surveillance technology, whichever they approve going forward, will be ready to go for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts July 1. So in talking with Chief Henry, one of the things that he really heard from this group was, and from City Council too, was the size of the packet that has come in the past with the surveillance technology and sort of the frustration that maybe with all the information in there, maybe none of it was getting read. And so what he's attempted to do is provide some more information in the chart and have that be the review and the information that you're looking at. He believes that the information that he's included is salient to review of each of the different types of technology and should give you enough to at least ask questions or provide some input. There are a number of the pieces of technology. There's about a dozen or so different technologies. There's a handful of them that were not used in the review period in the past year. And so that is noted. There are others, for example, like the body worn cameras. They're used all of the time, every day, for most of the work that that patrol is out doing. So it's everything and everything in between. So it really runs the gamut. We can walk through each one. We can ask questions. What's your pleasure tonight, and how you want to look at this information? Oh, I should note that in the past couple of years, The commission has taken the opportunity to appoint a subcommittee to kind of dig into the information a little bit more. That's completely up to you if you want to do that or if you wish to handle it a different way.
So, just from my perspective, I think that, it seems like, just given the calendar of things, we have an opportunity for sort of like a first reading and a second reading, on this item. Now that I'm, clear on, what actual agenda item we're on. I think it would be good now, just at this stage that we're in, if commissioners had, excuse me, or if anyone had specific questions on some of the specific items, requests for more information, requests for clarification, things like that, that we can sort of bring those forward now, and then hopefully maybe in the intervening time between now and next month's meeting, maybe get some clarity on some of those things, and then perhaps do what we've done in some past years of sort of at that time go through each one, and sort of make sure that there's no sort of trouble spots that we want to address. But yeah, I don't know if folks have a different way that they want to handle it, but I think if folks had questions about some of the specific technology items that they had, it might be good to sort of bring those forward and then sort of take it from there. But do folks have, like I said, sort of seeking clarification or more information about some of the items and their usage over the reporting cycle?
What I noticed in reading this is that a lot of the times the columns, how used and information to assess effectiveness is pretty much the same thing. And I don't know if somehow that could be made a little more like the remote body public safety cameras, so they say what they were used for, but the information and stats, perhaps we used it on 38 cases and 15 were sent to the DA for see if they got charged or something like that, then rather than reading the same thing in each column. And I don't know if anybody else had noticed that, but there's a number of them in which they are the same. So the small drones were used 38 times and that was great. But I don't know if the second paragraph should be deleted on the first column and then the second column explains it, but it's sort of like we're reading a lot of things twice. And I'm not sure they show exactly how we would assess effectiveness when we don't know the outcome of whether it was charged or sent to the DA or dismissed or whatever. Again, I think that there are real reasonable reasons things weren't used and still are maintained in our arsenal. I'm interested in whether they were misused more than I am. We've already approved these numerous times. So how do we know if they were used per protocol or not misused?
Like, yeah, that question I can answer, if you're okay with that. So if something was used adverse to protocol, and that would be noted, and we would, have information on that. We can actually say that if that would be helpful, rather than just being silent on it. In these cases, there was not misuse that we're aware of. Now, it's possible that there could have been something where it was misused, but it wasn't noted by anybody, and so that we don't have that information. To go back to your other comment, in terms of the two columns and maybe trying to further delineate the two columns, there was, so I think it was with the remote public safety cameras, maybe
There's
is a
a number
better
of them,
example
yeah.
of one that has, there's duplicate information, but there's more information in the effectiveness column, at least in terms of what the result was of the use of that particular piece of equipment. It'd be helpful if I pull that up on the screen.
I mean, actually, the remote public safety cameras section has the same verbiage
Yeah.
in 3 columns. The second paragraph in the first column is repeated in the second column, and again in the third column. And the third paragraph was repeated in the third column. So I guess, yeah, I'm with Commissioner Bliss that I'd like to see maybe some numbers. I see there are a few numbers in here, but and also I think in terms of policy violations, were there any? If there weren't, that's great. But it at least to have that information for any of them. My hunch is there were probably 0 to 1. And the ones that there have been in the past, I think, were mostly things like body worn cameras that were not turned on and things like that. So that'd be interesting to know, I think.
I think it's helpful at the beginning to be able to say no policy infractions were noted or whatever, because I think that's what people are concerned about in much of this technology, is that it will be used, because we've looked at the policies and our department has good policies and they have all kinds of safeguards there. So I think the next step is, are we following that policy? And it would make people be more assured to see that on there.
Yeah, I've routinely brought up my suspicion, oh, hey, I feel like there's, and it's just a feel, I fully, I'm upfront with that when I bring it up, but hey, I'm like, I don't know how strictly, the policies in terms of when a body cam is turned on is being followed, just because it's sort of a black box in terms of that, quite literally. Some more sunlight in that area, I think, would be helpful. But I think sort of drawing all of what has just been discussed just now together, I'm going to try to channel my best Commissioner Griswold. And because I remember in one of our previous conversations about this, I don't know if it was the full, slate of surveillance technology items or if it was just a couple that we were talking about. But I sort of feel like, I think she was mentioning in that conversation that our responsibility here is, hey, is anything bad going on here? And it's kind of difficult. You mentioned perhaps having some aggregate information as to how many of these cases were sort of, everyone knows my feelings about the district attorney. How many of these cases were forwarded to the district attorney's office for, for a recommended prosecution? Just because, I think as it's outlined in our responsibilities in the city, ordinance, it's, is this a good use of money? And is this just in terms of the equipment versus a different piece of equipment? Is this an effective tool for DPD to be using to address this, sort of crime fighting area? And I think when we have this sort of, sort of cookie cutter, sort of verbiage sort of replaced that, it sort of robs us of some of that qualitative information about how well or effectively a tool is being used, that sort of limits our ability. I think that's sort of been the running theme of, hey, we're getting this, phone book sized packet. I'm glad the, community and regional development students who probably don't know what a phone book is aren't here anymore. But, we're getting this like phone book sized, report that largely, like a phone book doesn't have a whole lot of usable information for us, in the 1 or 2 things that we might be looking for. And so some more of that, how effective is this tool being utilized, I think would be helpful for us to sort of do our best job as the, assistance to the city council in terms of these police accountability items.
Yeah, but I don't think because something wasn't used that it necessarily means we shouldn't have it available.
No, absolutely.
And-
But I think that
and
information
So
helps. Yep.
what I understand from the memo from Chief Henry is that at this point, there isn't an increase, there's not a budgetary increase in this. So it's not a monetary issue right now. It's a continued usage of and availability of, is my understanding of
Right.
what we're looking at.
It's like the running example that we keep encountering each year of this, I hate to sort of call it the life alert, but it's that
Right.
system that a number of seniors in the community use that unfortunately not enough people in the community use. And, sort of, we would never want to see, oh, hey, there's sort of a plateaued usage of this or a decreasing usage of this to sort of indicate, oh, we don't need this anymore. That would that would certainly be the wrong way to interpret that information.
Well, and vice versa. There may be that things aren't being used because we aren't publicizing they're available to the public. And so to know how many are using that system for alerting for special needs folks, and maybe when I've talked to people, they don't even know it exists. So we have technology that conversely, we might want to recommend that they put a little more information out about.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of something we did a year ago, which was to write a memo to the city council asking them to amend the surveillance ordinance. One was to add a small piece of verbiage, but also to recommend that we recommended, for instance, that there be signage put up at the sites of the fixed cameras with a QR code showing where they can find information about their use, and also space on the city's website. Could be the police, could be who knows, some other part of the, but some public access to the surveillance ordinance and how it's used on a annual basis, besides just the text of the report. And I don't think the council, I actually wrote to several council members. I got some feedback from some that, yeah, that sounds nice. Maybe they would do it, but it's disappeared into the ethos, into the ether. And so maybe we could, in addition to doing this, remind them or resend the letter, because it wasn't a big change, but surveillance ordinances are very important pieces of local statute, and the public has a right to know what's going on with them. And I mean, we take this pretty seriously. The council has asked us to review this every year. We do so. We've asked for more time, which we are given every year. And I think that it's important for us to sort of follow through with that mandate from city council. But I think there's more, a little more. We're not asking for, a lot, I think. But I agree with Mary's points. I think I'd like to see more data on here, less repetition, and to the piece that just because something isn't used doesn't mean that it's, I mean, it just, I don't know how you measure the effectiveness of these technologies. I don't know.
Vice Chair Wilson.
I find it interesting that the column complaints or violation is none, none, none. So I'm going to make an assumption that the violation would be a violation against the policy, correct? Complaints could be both internal or external, right? I mean, somebody who had used one of these could be complaining because of something, or could somebody, a citizen, complain because of the way the equipment was used?
Yeah, so in this case, the complaint is intended to mean an outside complaint, a resident complaining about
The use.
the use of it, not an internal complaint.
But could an officer make a complaint about the equipment themselves, and would we know about it? I mean, again, going to the fact if it's probably outside the scope, but if they saw misuse of that piece of equipment.
Well, if they're seeing misuse, then yes, absolutely. And then that would be a violation. If they are complaining about the equipment for some other reason, I don't know, they don't like it or something, then I don't think that we would get that information here. And we can certainly ask the chief if that's,
Just curious.
if there's particular pieces of the equipment that the staff are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we have to use that thing again. We wouldn't have that information here.
But again, does it not seem a little strange that there are no complaints? I mean, being new on this committee, I don't know.
So I guess I would say that perhaps there are people who don't like some of the technology, but unless they have actually made a complaint to the police department, we wouldn't include it here. So it's a formal complaint.
I mean, if they don't know about it, how can they complain about it? So this again goes to the level of transparency. What the public knows is, part of this whole piece, I think. And, if they don't know about it,
And then also, as I'm sure, Stephen and Mike are aware, there's a whole bunch of people who not a whole bunch, but there's a number of people who I've had conversations with who've had an incident that, could be definitely, complainable for lack of a better term, but for a variety of reasons, they're not willing to, launch an official complaint about it, which, can sometimes be, from a commission perspective, be like kind of frustrating. It's like, oh, we got Mike and Stephen here for a reason. But sometimes people, again, for a variety of reasons, don't want to pursue that. And so it might not be information available to us. Other questions, comments? Go ahead.
I'm wondering, in all the years we've looked at this, has there ever been a complaint or violation? I'm thinking maybe not.
I believe that there was at least a violation. If I'm recalling, I want to say it was on one of the body worn cameras.
Okay.
And I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago.
But not complaints. That
I'm not remembering. I'm
just
not remembering if
wondering-
they were in the report. I
Yeah.
have to go back and look at the past reports.
I would be interested in the definition of complaint, because perhaps that maybe just should be violations, just because I'm not sure what.
Yeah,
a
I
complaint
don't know if Mike or Stephen are recalling any conversations that they've had or complaints that they've reviewed that have been specific to the surveillance tech.
I cannot recall any. Steve?
Kelly, I cannot either. And I think the chair makes an interesting point that just because there are no complaints doesn't mean there aren't people that are unhappy in one way or another with the equipment and the way that it's being used. And conversely, just because people are unhappy doesn't necessarily mean that there's a violation. So we haven't seen any investigations that have come to our attention, and to Commissioner Canning's point, the public awareness level, I think, could certainly be a factor in that also.
So then basically for there to be a complaint, it would have to be because of a violation of the policy.
Well, a complaint can be made regardless, and that happens often. People make complaints because they are upset about something that has happened to them. And what should be happening then is that that would trigger a review by the department that would assess the circumstances and then determine whether a violation of the policy occurred. So those two things overlap, but are not, completely congruent.
So a complaint without a violation, nothing would happen on here. A complaint with a violation, then we would see it.
Well, it seems like the way the chart is set up is that it would be indicated that a complaint was made, and then whether that led to a finding of violation would be another entry, another bit of data that the department provided. But it looks like it's 0 and 0.
Yeah, we would still count complaints even if they're ultimately determined to be unfounded, if that makes sense.
Other questions, comments?
I mean, I can think of an example where somebody's, the police department's using a drone for, they're looking for someone, and a citizen notices the drone and thinks that it's over their property and makes a complaint. And so that to me would be a complaint about a policy violation that involves a surveillance technology. And that's something that if the citizen chose to, they could complain to the police department, then that would have to get reviewed by the IPA. I think that's the one example that came to mind right off the bat. I'm sure there's other things too, but some of these surveillance technologies are fairly covert from the public, these computer systems and things like that. So the violations are not very, they're opaque.
Yeah, it goes back to the point that you made originally that particularly with like body cameras and the other technology here that's significantly less overt as you described than like a drone. And a violation would just not be apparent to the sort of victim of the violation in many cases, going back to some of the folks who I've talked to who've, experienced an incident where they feel like they could have reported it. The very last one that I was talking to someone about, I was like, oh, well, they should have had their body cameras on in that incident. We have no idea because, they never reported that situation. But they would have to, kind of complain about it and sort of, have Mike and Steven take a look at the body camera footage to even know, if it had been turned on, if there, if there was any
And
sort of
I think
violation there.
and I think there's differences between these sorts of complaints where, that drone was over my house, where they're looking in my house, versus the use of these tools in court cases where the use of this technology doesn't really come up until somebody's been charged and they're going through the court process. You can explain it better. And so that's the first time you find out about it. But I think even, stepping back away from that, it's just the normal everyday use of these technologies. I mean, there's issues with them.
Well,
Please.
I was going to say, I think that's the role that this commission is kind of supposed to play in the process, right? Is learning about the technologies, thinking about potential uses, misuses, and then, giving our opinions and helping set boundaries, et cetera, and passing our recommendations to the council. And I think, well, now I go into my editorial part, where I think we have all, as a body, have not been too reticent around approving everything that they ask for, and now we're kind of like, wait a second, what are they doing with it? But it's like it's a little too late, like we said, have at it. I don't know. Yeah, I can see potential misuses, with all these, or usually that's not what's happening. We don't know. But I think that is kind of, if people are looking at this going, wow, how are they using this stuff? And maybe that's something to keep in mind next time when it's like whether we're approving it or not, or recommendations on how we think it might be used a little bit earlier in the process.
And then before we go to Cecilia, it was right before you arrived, Elizabeth, and I said, I'm trying to channel my best Commissioner Griswold, because we were having a conversation about, how the information in these reports can be a little bit more usable for us as a commission, more usable for the council, more usable for folks in the public who are taking a look at it. And I think having, and we sort of, chewed on, how that works, in the most effective way possible, but more information on how effectively these tools are being used, how much benefit the department is gaining from, the use of any of these tools, how much maybe lack of information sharing about the availability of these tools might, be impacting how much it's being used in that cycle. And so getting a little bit more of that information that allows us to do our job, that I agree with you, is our role here. I think will be helpful for us and for everyone who's kind of taking a look at this information to kind of make a better assessment of it. And so hopefully we'll, in the time between our first reading and our second reading, we'll try to do, get some better info there. Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to chime in on what Commissioner Canning already mentioned, and that's just that, they're talking about the drone, for example, when we had talked about that, or other type of surveillance tools. There's the good side, when it's used appropriately, and then there's the not so good side when it's misused or overused, or used to get into, people's yards, or misused to obtain private information. So that's one of the challenging things, is that we want to have oversight, police oversight, and make sure that the information is not being, the tools are not being misused. But again, we want to support our officers when they do need the tools, to keep our community safe. And it seems like it's this constant balance. I can only imagine what it's like for them, but for us, it's a constant balance of trying to make sure that we're saying, okay, but we have this concern over here too. And I think we've expressed our concerns over the time, but I'm glad this is being discussed because that is the challenge we've come across over the years. Yeah.
I wanted to ask specifically about an item on page 18 of our packet. It's the last one related to the small UAS drones, where it states that a drone or more than one was used at a large public event with elevated safety risks. So I'd be curious what that was,
It's probably picnic day.
what that was for. Well, we don't know until.
I don't know specifically, but I will
Mm-hmm.
ask the chief and we'll get that information. But I would expect that it would be something like a picnic day.
Mhm.
Recall a conversation about the what is it called? The sort of enhanced safety zone, sort of.
The safety enhancement zone.
There we go. I got
Close.
got the order mixed up.
And also those drones may have been used by a different police force, i.e. university police.
Well, this is all Davis Police Department
Okay.
documentation. The last item on page.
Because this is not a
18.
shared tool between departments, right?
I don't believe we've shared it.
Okay.
No.
So, and they do note there that there's a couple of non-law enforcement reasons that they have used the drone that are completely unrelated to law enforcement and more related to training. So we did a flyover of Bretton Woods just to show what the progress was with the agreement and blessing of the developer.
As I noted at the beginning of this conversation, I think it'll be good to bring up sort of questions for more information, questions for clarification about the different technology items, their usage over the past reporting cycle, and then hopefully we can try to get some additional information and some clarification about any of those questions between now and our next hearing of this conversation in April. Any other sort of questions or Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, I'd be interested in moving this discussion into perhaps another dimension, go a little deeper into a factor here that I don't think we've talked a lot about in any of these sessions on surveillance. I find myself uncomfortable sometimes during this conversation because I don't feel that I can speak only for myself, of course. I don't feel that I really have an expert knowledge of the ramifications of these specific technologies. We're talking about the body cameras and the drones, and we've talked about the, I forget the technical name, and I was upbraided correctly when I called them grenades one time. I was told they're not grenades, and here's why they're not grenades. But now I don't remember the real name, but I think you probably all know what I'm talking about, the handheld weapon that is tossed and explodes, possibly in the home of a suspect or a culprit, or used for disarmament, whatever. Anyway, that is representative, perhaps. I know I'm taking an extreme small item that we don't even know if it has ever been used by our police department. So, but it's illustrative of what I see as a limitation on our technical knowledge. And this is not a criticism. I think we are civilians with a different, with various backgrounds, and we don't have the engineering expertise to know the depth of the safety issues. But what I'm getting around to in a circuitous way, for which I apologize, I'll try to be more direct, is I think there's another dimension to this, and that is the attitude of the cop on the beat. And this has to do with the culture of our department and the leadership and recruitment, training. All of these are elements that add up to the attitude with which our police approach an emergency, what their expectations are, how, and many of them are expert in the use of some of these devices we're talking about. This came up to me in my mind sharply when we were talking again for the umpteenth time about body cameras. And as I have expressed before, I feel that they are an essential, not only that we have working cameras at all times as a part of every officer's clothing effectively, that it's always on their body, but also the attitude that they have about it. They look upon it as something that protects them as well as protecting us. Again, we don't like to talk about us and them, but we're the police thinking in terms of their own safety and security and effectiveness, as well as what the public sees when they look at these issues. So I think the summation of my suggestion is that we get together again with the chief on this particular subject. It was touched on a bit when he was here, but we didn't really get into attitudes and the psychological and emotional aspects from the police department's point of view on how these technologies should be used, taking in all of the considerations that we've been discussing.
Thank you. So I think this sort of connects with what I was saying earlier about my general feeling of there, being a lack of tightness with regard to our body worn camera policies, but that's, generally a feeling that I don't really have any sort of data in terms of how the department has utilized that tool to substantiate, right? Don, you mentioned sort of our kind of civilian oversight role, and I've, a fierce defender of this for a variety of reasons. And I think that means in part, we have to sort of be accepting of the fact that we aren't technical experts on law enforcement, right? And by we, I mean as a community, not just this commission. But also I think that does mean that we need to be kind of diligent in terms of making sure that we are informing ourselves as to how some of these technologies work, how some of these law enforcement practices operate. I never wanted to seem like I'm sort of dissing the chief, either the current chief or the last chief in saying this. I know I've said this over the years and the time that I've been on this commission, but I think we can gain a lot from hearing from knowledgeable and experienced professionals in the department who aren't the chief on some of these issues sometimes. And so I think it would be good in light of what, kind of all of this conversation has been, but particularly what you're saying, Commissioner Sherman, that, it probably might be too tight between now and the next meeting, but it would be good, I think, to get either in document form or in someone coming to present to us at one of these meetings, someone from the department to review the training that officers receive with regard to the use of these pieces of technology. I think that might give both us and the council and the public, I think, some more information I think, as a number of commissioners have said, be a little bit more comfortable with how these things are being used and that they aren't being used in a way that's contrary to the values of the community or the policies of the department. But I do think we can use some more information as to how these are utilized.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would go as far as wanting to know all about how they train officers, because that's pretty down in the weeds, at least as far as my feeling is. A thought I had while we were talking earlier was that we had talked about getting a tour of the police department. It would be nice to see some of these, for instance, the computer systems, to see how they operate and to see, to talk to the officers or the dispatchers to see how they actually use these tools on a day-to-day basis. And we could make that as part of, going down and taking a look. I've never been behind the desk. And I think as a commission, it might be helpful for us to do that. But unless, it's hard to get an independent expert out of the police department who's not part of the police department to explain these items. And I know we've had folks from, what's his name, from Oakland Privacy come and talk about some of these items. So, I think it's important to get a lot of different views on them, and to understand how the technology are used on a day-to-day basis. So that's all I have. So,
Two things. I saw your hand, so maybe, and then I saw Kelly. One, I just want to say, in terms of getting someone who's not the chief, it's less of an independence thing and more that, there are people who are interacting with these things on a more day-to-day sort of basis, who I think can maybe provide us some more granular sort of overview of these things, where, of course, the chief has many competencies and can provide some of those things. But I think it's good for us to not only hear from some of those outside folks, like from folks from Secure Justice, but also a variety of voices from inside the department. But then also, just in terms of what, I don't want to put words in Commissioner Sherman's mouth in terms of what he was describing, but for me, in terms of getting more information about how officers are trained, it's, with respect to our work as a commission, it would be focused on like the civil rights implications of these tools, not sort of, how do you take it out of the box? Like, yeah, I'm not interested in that sort of information either. I don't think that'd be helpful to the commission, but I think, some of the privacy / civil rights sort of implications of these technologies and how officers are trained to be cognizant of those things and not violate policy relative to that, I think could be helpful for us. But Kelly, I don't know if you wanted to clarify anything.
I was just going to note, and we can talk about this more when we get to the long range, but as of right now, what we have scheduled for the April meeting is for the chief and one of the lieutenants to come and talk to you about internal affairs, internal investigations, which is something that was requested by the commission. I don't remember if it was in January, but at an earlier meeting. So if you have them both here, we can have them talk about other things as well, if the commission is interested in that. So I just wanted to bring that up as a potential. You could get 2 bites.
Yes. Commissioner Bliss.
Yeah, I was going to say, as I recall in the policies, they always discuss the training that they have. So I think we are able to see the training. Now, your discussion about where the civil rights and the ethics fall into that, I think would be a lovely question. How is that addressed within the policies and the training rather than specific? Because there is so much information in their policies. And as far as your body cam thing, he said there were no violations. I mean, and so not that they know of. So again, I don't quite understand the suspicion as far as having those things. I can understand there might be several, but I'd be real interested in the civil rights ethics and how does one perhaps encourage people to bring forward those types of things.
Yeah, the only reason I bring up the suspicion thing, and I, again, very upfront with it, it's a non-fact based suspicion, is just that I know that this is not one that's only, held by me. And I believe that, more information again about how, what the ethical interplay is and all of that kind of stuff could help assuage some of those concerns, suspicions, whatever they might be from different folks. Yeah.
And I would kind of characterize my own perspective, not as suspicious per se of any specific individuals within the police force, but more, I have huge suspicions about almost everything on this list. Not that even anybody's violating a policy of use, but just, I mean, some of the stuff just sends a chill down my spine. The level of surveillance, the direction that we're going in as a society of constantly being watched by a police force. Not that any individual is violating any policy or doing anything wrong, but just that, just gets added more and more and more and more surveillance by the government. People have different views about the role the government should play in surveilling citizens. And so it's not exactly a matter of a complaint or a violation. It's more, could be ideological, or the way it plays out in a courtroom, or the fact that, I mean, like I said, on page 18, where it's like, yeah, there's an event. We decided it was what was the terminology? A large public event with elevated safety risks. So they're watching everyone there. So, I mean, in terms of thinking about suspicion, it's more kind of like thinking of everybody present at a large public event as suspicious potentially. So yeah, I would just kind of, this is just me speaking as myself. It's not about the complaint or the violation. It's about just some of the use of this stuff more generally.
Well, and I think.
And that's why I said maybe at this point it's even a little too late, because
Yeah.
it's
they've
what's
been
happening.
approved. But
is what
I
it
think
is.
it would be interesting to see how do they decide to use a drone for a large public event, and what information are they gaining and looking at?
Mhm.
Because again, this is new technology for us in the city, and perhaps it would be an interesting thing to get a little more information about how and why they will use this new technology.
Yeah, or any, just going down the line, that all of these things, the trail camera, the public safety cameras, the license plate readers, GPS trackers, I mean, and then how that information is used later for either people who are accused or just for anybody to be surveilled by the government in that way.
Again, I mean, there's a balancing of all sorts of issues with these sorts of things. And how does the police department decide this event has high risk, and what's the benefit versus the risk? And how do they make those decisions? I mean, that's a little beyond, I mean, just looking at surveillance, but there's these kinds of decision-making processes that they're making all the time that affect the public. And is it safe to do this, not safe? I mean, a public event, we wouldn't have, 10 years ago, we didn't have the drones, so they would just bring a lot of cops and mingle. And, I think of the pepper spray incident. I mean, there were cops everywhere. And, different kind of surveillance, and but yeah, how these decisions are made, what they're weighing on both sides, I think is, I'm not going to ask them to, I mean, I don't know how we can ask them for that information, to talk to them, other than to talk to the chief and maybe the other people that in his, administrative tree there, to find out what their values are. And we've already heard from him about some things, which would, especially around the immigration stuff, is quite reassuring. And I think the surveillance stuff these are reasonable questions to ask too.
And some of these are going to be decision-based, when to use it or turn it on and when not. And some of them are just constant, right? I mean, some of these cameras are always going, is my understanding. Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think it is going to be important that we, to the point that you were making a second ago, that we really interrogate, particularly because of police accountability. That sounds kind of aggressive. Inquire as to, how these decisions are being made, because, all of us are aware of the, history and context of the creation of this commission. And, I still, go back to questioning a whole lot of the decisions the department made, now at this point, close to a decade ago, about, Picnic Day being a public safety or, public event, that has some safety challenges or, safety components or concerns to it. And then, the level of, decisions that were made to respond to that, I think most of us, across the board can kind of agree, oh, that was kind of out of pocket in terms of how those decisions were made to respond to that. So, inquiring, I almost said it again, inquiring as to how those decisions are being made, I think could be really important as to the work of the commission. And then just quickly, Commissioner Griswold, to your point of like, is it too late in terms, because I do take your point about, us approving, we have skin in the game to a certain degree as the council does in terms of approving some of these technologies already. But I think our role as the commission, similarly for the council in these situations where we already have approved the use of a technology, did discover at some point, hey, girl, we got to tighten that up a little bit in terms of the policy or how that's used, but we don't determine, hey, this is a technology we want to get rid of. That's where the commission, I think ideally as to how all these things are laid out, is supposed to come in and say, hey, let's amend this ordinance to say this, that, and the third in terms of making sure that this is going to work a little bit better for our situation. And so that's also, again, why I think it's really important that we inquire as to how some of these decisions are being made, how some of the training is occurring, particularly with regard to ethics and civil rights components of these technologies, so that if it is necessary for us to tighten up some of the use policies for some of these technologies, that we can sort of step in and I think fulfill our role and do that. But you had a comment?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting on the policy on the drone, on the privacy. The last sentence, first paragraph says, members shall take reasonable precautions to avoid inadvertently recording or transmitting images of areas where a reasonable expectation of privacy exists. And that comes down to, I know what it says, but what does it really mean?
How's it utilized?
Yeah, I mean, because again, I'm assuming this is sort of an everyman thing, but it's kind of obscure the way it's written, I think.
That word reasonable.
Well, I mean, that's a legal term of art, reasonable expectation of
Right.
privacy in terms of Fourth Amendment search and seizure issues. There's been like
Yeah.
thousands
What
of
would reasonable
cases that have,
citizen-
kind of tried to explicitly define what does that mean. And so reasonable, you'd have the most expectation of privacy in your own home. That'll be most sacrosanct. And then in your car is a lesser level. That's the curtilage. That's another exactly. No, exactly. I mean, there's so many cases. Yeah. Your front yard, your backyard,
Right.
how much you
Your
have.
porch.
Can they fly over and watch? I mean, yeah, this is all stuff that's been debated over hundreds of years. Right. But then if you're out in public, your expectations go down, 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 down. Mhm.
I think we have to remember also that the police live in a world of statute and policies and regulations, and a lot of their training, for better or for worse, from post-training to specialized training that they get, has to do with what their limits are, when they can draw their weapon. I mean, we've had debates here about is drawing your weapon a use of force. Some departments in the Bay Area, I think San Francisco and Berkeley in particular, might be wrong. I think we've is part of that discussion. They define it as a use of force. My understanding is our department doesn't have that as a use of force, pulling your weapon out. And so there are, and that's how they're trained. So the training is important. And I agree with Dawn that it's important because it does get to, the attitudes that people bring and how they then, what the practice is, because the policy is great, but it really gets down to the level of practice where it's really important, and understanding what the practice is of a police department. That's why there are things called pattern of practice investigations. They look and see how the police actually act on the street in a day-to-day. And we know it's not always by policy.
And now DOJ doesn't do those anymore. Lordy, Lordy, what a world to live in. Any other questions, comments about the this iteration of the surveillance technology report?
I guess I just want us to sort of decide, as Kelly suggested, in the past, we've had a subcommittee. Do we want a subcommittee to come up with some questions that we can give right away to the police chief? Do we want to just let this discussion, as she's kept notes, move forward? But I'd like us to sort of decide something.
My thought is just because we're dealing with a 1 month timeline, that a subcommittee might be kind of, I know we have done that in the past. I think that might be overkill sort of this time around. And so, yeah, my thought is that we sort of do the initial bits of the conversation as a full, well, do both stages of the conversation as a full commission, bring up the initial questions now, see what additional information we need, you know, to get between now and the next month's meeting, and then try to have the conversation in April be sort of our action conversation about, you know, what do we want to recommend, you know, what do we want to pass along to the city council in terms of this year's report.
Because the April meeting is our last chance. What our recommendations need to be done in April to go to them.
Yeah, can you?
Is that correct, Kelly?
So it would be better if they were done in April. I think May is a little bit of an extra bite at the apple if you need that. The information will go to the council. It's either June 3rd or June 4th, whatever that first Tuesday is. And so if you back up from that,
Right.
they'll need some time to put together the report, et cetera. So
it's just tight from the chief being here and then us finishing up
And
yeah,
on the
you-
same meeting. That's
Yes.
all I'm saying.
the chief would not be available for the May meeting, which is why we were hoping to have him here for the April meeting.
Other thoughts about our process? Oh,
One final thing, I don't know if you at all touched on the article Commissioner Bliss sent along from what's happening in West Sac and Rochester, New York, because I think it really could dovetail with what we're talking about here is the level of transparency into police data and activity that they have now in West Sac is exactly the kind of stuff we're talking about, to be able to like look into these things specifically in a way that would be not just like we have to ask a question, then we wait a month, et cetera, but I mean, I think, and not there's anything to do like an action item from that, but just reading that in light of this conversation makes you think about what other models are out there and the level of data
It's
transparency for a
not
whole community
It's not
potentially.
available yet. They're a
Mhm.
pilot project and it's going to be rolled out shortly,
Sure.
but I was sad it wasn't us getting.
Yeah.
I really was disappointed because, I mean, Yolo County was the first to get it from a countywide DA piece. And West Sac is.
Yeah.
But yes, that's.
Just
why.
thinking big picture about
It
models
would-
of,
It's everything we've wanted.
Yeah,
Everything we've wanted.
right.
I don't want to get too far afield with the agenda item, but just for your information, I did share that with the chief and he said, oh, I'm looking into this exact same thing, working with West Sac so that we can have the same thing here. So maybe that's another agenda item you want to ask him to talk about.
yes. And for folks who know that. Which dashboard?
Police dash.
Oh, yeah, okay. Like what, are we talking about RIPA? Or are we talking like which one of the mind-numbingly large amount of databases that are available to us? So yeah, other thoughts about how we handle sort of the discussion and this particular item going forward to the next meeting? Anyone have a burning desire to create a subcommittee on this subject matter? Okay. I'll open up to because I feel like I haven't done that yet. Public comment on this particular item. Any of that? If not, we'll take it back to the commission. Any final items here? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Body camera. Does the body camera cases that received a lot of publicity, one, Irene Nickel. Tennessee, and one of the officers had his body camera on. And who wasn't, I can't say he was part of the initial assault group, but that gave the police department and the people down in Memphis the opportunity to see what happened in the very and then the rest was captured by their own city camera. The other one was Breonna Taylor down in Louisville, Kentucky, and multiple agencies were. And the first thing that came out, nobody's camera. I said to a friend that it was happening. I said, first of all, with that many agencies involved in that raid, somebody is gonna cover their own ass and have their body camera. And this comes out much, much later, that in fact, that was true. There was officers, other agencies, not with the Louisville department, that had the camera on and were able to capture a variety of things that actually implicated department in comments and things that they. It was just that it wouldn't happen in real life. It just wouldn't happen. And so that body camera, when the uniform is on, and in my opinion, is the camera is part of the uniform. So once you put the uniform on, body camera on, it's extremely important to see what happened in the course of the day. And it's also their protection if they haven't done anything wrong. There's no reason to be afraid. But then you get into issues where the department just doesn't want to show the cameras and all that. And lastly, I'll say with George Floyd, there was a Latino man killed very similar to George Floyd in Wisconsin. And they held on to the footage of the body camera because we all know what happened with George Floyd. And almost the statute of limitations were to run out before the attorney could file, which was within 4 days. And so once again, that body camera can tell a story, and it can either, quit the officer or it can convict them. But they all have protocols and procedures. It's critical that it goes on when that uniform.
Thank you. I think as we're all aware, these body cameras are some of the earliest 21st century police accountability and reform measures, way back in sort of like the Mike Brown era, largely predating, the George Floyd era of police reform and things like that. And, we think of ourselves as lucky in some of these other situations, like the Picnic Day 5 incident where, there was no body camera footage available. And it wasn't, it was only because we were lucky enough to have someone driving by with a dash cam that we have any, unbiased, objective footage of what happened at that incident. And so having this technology available, having it utilized in touch with department policy, is incredibly important, as it was mentioned in public comment, to either sort of hold an officer accountable or acquit them, if they've done nothing wrong in that situation. And so, yeah, incredibly important in making sure that we have the right policies to make sure that they're, properly being utilized.
And I would say just besides the more like horrific and sensationally horrific examples too of perhaps even like, police brutality or et cetera, violence. I mean, body camera is just used day in, day out. The bread and butter is actually in investigations, both in terms of that the district attorney's office is going to use and public defenders too. I mean, I've argued cases where it's like, no, we're showing it during the trial because it's like, it didn't go down the way you said in the report, like that kind of stuff, or it's actually very damning evidence against the defendant. So besides, just to point out, like in terms of, besides police misconduct, being caught on camera day in, day out, it's often defendant misconduct or showing that maybe the report isn't accurate to what happened or all kinds of things along those levels, just in terms of prosecution and defense.
Most of what I spend time doing during holiday seasons is watching these. I don't know why I'm a weirdo like this, but watching these sort of pullovers gone wrong. And the only way that you're able to review those is because there's body camera footage from those incidents. Any last minute comments, questions about our surveillance technology report for the year? Yes.
So I have just a general question. What I've heard a lot of requests for additional data give you the chart, additional information. So I've got that. Is it safe to assume that nobody misses the long staff report, or do you want me to? The links are there. Okay, just checking, wanted to make sure.
You always want to double check. Okay, well, if nothing further on that, we'll go ahead and move to our item 7B, which is our recap of our public outreach meeting, which, as we've previously discussed, was just last month with the very punny title, Who You Gonna Call, referring to our various non-law enforcement public safety services that are available in Davis and throughout Yolo County. I know we had our committee, which, if I recall correctly, had Commissioner Griswold, Bliss, and Sherman. No? Canning. There we go. Okay, I got it. I got it mostly right. But I don't know if any of the three of y'all want to lead us off in comments about how the event went, and then we can just sort of take it from there. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it went very well. As usual, public turnout is very small, and we had, I think, a dozen citizens there from it seemed a variety of backgrounds and ages. We had at least a couple, 3 or 4 retired people there, and some young folks too, which is always good in this town. And the turnout from the agencies was very good. They brought materials. They were able to relatively stay within the length of time we asked them to. But that's, I think, to be expected. And I think the question and answer period was very good in the sense that people asked a lot of very tough questions of some of the people. A lot of the questions had to do with homeless folks, people without housing, and how we deal with them. And that was in part, I think, because of the agencies that we had there. But it's obviously a concern for people in Davis. So I thought it was a pretty good event. We had to tell people they had to leave, which is always good. So other subcommittee members?
I would agree. Yeah, I think everything you said, I thought it was great conversation. People really put a lot into it. The folks who came and gave presentations and brought all the materials. And yeah, again, I think the only thing we could have wanted was more people there. The people who were there were really engaged, both the presenters and the general public. Yeah, so I think just starting earlier with publicity, I feel like last year we had more people, and I think we were a bit more intentional as the whole commission, not just the committee, to okay, I'll take this group and advertise to them, and I'll handle this group and advertise to them, that kind of thing. I think if it started earlier and we were more intentional, explicit around different groups to invite and bring in and how to attract them. But I thought it was good overall.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm going to shout out to Kelly, because Kelly really helped us get our act together with a couple meetings that she attended. And so I really appreciated that help, and to give, the subcommittee a boost, and to also to, come up with a flyer to manage that, and to make sure that some people knew what was, and a lot of the liaising with the groups were done through Kelly. So thank you very much, Kelly.
I don't really have anything to add to that. I was not expecting very much more of a turnout than what we had, because previous events, we don't get young people, but we did have a few more this time. The total number of people was a little disappointing to me, but the enthusiasm and involvement and commitment of emotion and caring about these issues that was expressed by the people who came, that was a real positive, and I saw more of that than I had seen in previous meetings. It was like they were ready to sweep the floor and tell us the next meeting was about to start or something, at which point people would finally breaking up the conversations and leaving. So that's a good sign. I have one suggestion, and I may have made it before. If we could somehow find the right person, the generalization or the cliche would be that it would be a young person, because we think those are the people most involved in social media. And that's not totally true, but mostly, perhaps we can agree. So if we could get some kind of maybe through friends and relationships that we have and that our friends have, maybe we could put together with some time ahead, not just a few days, but let's say 30 days before the event, people who are familiar and would say, okay, you take X and you take TikTok and you take YouTube, and we have like 5 people, and each of them commit that they'll spend some time putting the story on social media and bringing it to the attention through all the different ways that they have on social media of as many people as they can. And we're not going to get thousands of people, but we may get a few dozen instead of 10. That would be, so we would be, it isn't for our benefit, it isn't to flatter us or make us feel good, but it gives us an opportunity to more fulfill our mission as a commission and feel that we really have accomplished something. Not to say we didn't accomplish something important, because we did, for all the people that were there and for the people that they would talk with afterwards. Most of the people that I talked to indicated that they had at least 1 or 2 organizations they had heard from here in our meeting that they didn't even know about before the meeting. So that made me feel, yeah, we've done something, this is part of what we wanted to accomplish. But I just think we're not really hitting the market where it lives today, which is social media. And I can't do it. Maybe some of you can and do. If you're on Facebook or whatever it might be, you can be maybe one of us who has some better experience than I do would want to be the leader of a group that we put together of other citizens, including young people, including a lot of young people. And then I think we could take what we have and make it, whatever the subject will be next year, make it all the more exciting and useful.
I'll say with regard to social media, I know, at least in this commission, I think perhaps Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald and I are perhaps the most active on social media with regard to things that are going on for the commission. I know sometimes Commissioner Griswold is out there too. I don't know if Barbara is slumming it out there on X on behalf of the city, and God bless her. But I was appreciative that the city from its communication channels, that at least I followed them on Instagram and Facebook, did share the flyer I think about a month ahead, and I was trying to I could have been a little bit more I don't know, direct in terms of how I shared it with folks, but I was sharing it, on stories for, the weeks sort of preceding the event. But I think we can be, to the point that both Commissioner Griswold and Sherman made, we can be a little bit more intentional about how we sort of divvy up the outreach responsibilities. I do remember, I think maybe the second to last, or maybe 3 outreach events ago, I think at this commission meeting, we were sitting down, okay, Celia's going to talk to these 3 organizations, and then so we might want to employ that this next time around. And then what I wanted to say, and I think different people have touched on this, what I was glad to see at the event is reflective of what I've heard from people in conversation is that there's a lot of desire for non-police, non-law enforcement responses to the various concerns that develop around our unhoused population. And so, obviously, different Supreme Court decisions, different changes in the economy have caused, a lot of different concerns about our unhoused community. We remember, for folks who were there, heard the commentary from the gentleman who was concerned about a person he was seeing over and over again. And as he was describing the person, I was like, I feel like I know who he's talking about. But even that guy who I feel like, I don't think this is a criticism, but I had like the most conservative sort of perspective of the folks who were there with us that evening. Even he was like, look, where's the not calling 911 response to this? And I think that was a good indication, going back to what you said, Commissioner Sherman, about how the folks there are sort of representative of a audience of people who can't or won't show up to events like that. I think that's probably an indication that there's a broader cross-section of folks in our community who have that mindset, who are wanting to do something or to get some sort of resources. There was the woman who was, really adamant about, I want a card or a flyer or a refrigerator magnet that just has all the stuff on it. Like, just put it on one sheet of paper that I can, utilize. And so I was, again, glad to see that, people's, focus was in that area, because all of us are aware that sometimes even in this community, when people have had concerns about our unhoused population, that's not the immediate sort of first thing that people jump to. It's sort of let's call 911 and let's sort of use the sort of punitive sort of measures that sometimes what people can reach to first. And so I was glad that was not the flavor of our conversation. Other comments, reflections about how the event went?
You just reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, and I was very impressed with it. Somewhere along the line, a topic came up about how people are expected to, or what would be the generous, considerate, proper way to confront the homeless person on the street, or you walk past them, or are you supposed to look at them, or you're supposed to not look at them? And then that led into a discussion, and it turned out, maybe to our surprise, that this suddenly was a topic we hadn't even talked about, and in preparation, and there were many people, of the few that were there, were interested in that, and they picked up on it. So if we started earlier with, I'm not sure just how we could structure it, but it could be in the form of publicity, maybe 2 months before the event, that would be along the lines, we're going to have an outreach event, we call it, or a meeting, a public meeting, whatever we want. I don't think outreach event is really, if I were writing the ad, that wouldn't be the headline I'd want to use, but a way to describe it, a public meeting. And we're soliciting ideas. We are the Police Accountability Commission. We are your Police Accountability Commission, fellow citizens, and we would like your suggestions as to what would make a good meeting that you would be interested in. And then we would get some response, and from that we could build an agenda and a program that we could then promote as being the result of the survey that we did. And this is what you folks want to talk about, and this is what we're going to talk about. So just, I had forgotten, but something you said triggered my recollection that suddenly that kind of off the wall subject that we hadn't in our preparation anticipated caught fire among the people that were there, and they went with it.
Just both in terms of outreach and maybe in terms of what you're mentioning, Commissioner Sherman, in terms of developing next year's topic or theme for the event. I think sort of the old school method sometimes work the best. And, most of us are a part of some sort of group that meets monthly or some sort of similar time frame. And, what I sort of call it is, hitting the announcement circuits. Each one of these meetings usually has some announcements, usually toward the end of the meeting, where you can bring up things like this. We've seen Trustee Jackson from the Davis Joint Unified School District come to some of our meetings to talk about the library thing, you know, different things that are relevant to the education space. And so I think either in terms of asking people what they think would be a good topic for the next year event, or just saying, hey, we have this event that we've already decided what the topic is, please come to it. I think, you know, hitting the announcement circuit, you know, kind of at the end of these meetings that we're mostly already all going to, would be a good way to try to engage people in that. Any other comments, questions, concerns about the outreach event?
Just one additional comment. I think to a T, each of the presenters followed up with me after the meeting and just expressed their gratitude in being invited. Even the ones I thought maybe I was forcing to come. But they all were really happy to be there and really eager to share kind of what they do and how they do it. So that was actually pretty gratifying because there was some really nice discussion, I think, overall, if you took it as a group.
And I like how they all kind of seemed like family. They were like, "Oh yeah, we do these three things together," and you know, so it's a little family reunion there about various public safety resources. Oh yes, thanks. You know, I should probably do that. A public comment on our review or recap, excuse me, of our public outreach meeting. Any public comment on this item? All right. Taking it back to the commission, anything final from our commissioners?
A really nice MC.
Yes. Thank you to Commissioner Griswold for stepping up. You know, it's never the job that any commissioner wants to do necessarily for these events. Yes. So we're glad that you represented the team well in that regard. Okay, so subcommittee updates. And so I already shared prior to the meeting starting that at least if as long as Commissioner Sherman and Escamilla Greenwald didn't meet secretly behind my back, we did not have a meeting to discuss, you know, how we're going to dock your pay, Stephen and Mike. You know, so we need to do that between now and the April meeting, and then you know, as we usually do, we'll probably want to have a conversation, Mike, Stephen, with y'all as a subcommittee to sort of discuss any sort of questions or different things like that that might.
We thought we would put it out there if they could submit 5 things that they've done every day. Sorry.
Great idea.
So, you know. And we might do one extension, but you know, who knows? But yes, no update with regard to that subcommittee. Yeah, I guess public comment. Any public comment to admonish us for not having met in the past 2 months? We will fully accept that. If not, we'll go on to let's see, our long range calendar. We kind of previewed, I guess, some things that we wanted to have in future meetings. I know Kelly said we'll have, I believe you said the chief and then the person running internal affairs at the.
Yeah, one of the likely to be Lieutenant Beckwith.
Okay. Things that folks want to add to a future agenda, Commissioner Bliss?
I have a couple things. We did talk a bit about the police measures project. So I don't know if you would add that onto the chief's discussion or whether that should be a separate agenda item, these measures that West SAC is doing.
Yeah, so if the commission wants to add that, I would recommend that it be a separate agenda item, but it could happen if you wanted to when the chief and lieutenant are here at the next meeting in April or at a different time that works for the
I just
commission.
would like it addressed at some point. So I don't know if we're too full next time or whatever, however you fit it.
I don't know if we're necessarily too full. I would just recognize that we that would be kind of 3-ish things that we wanted them to address, right? It would be just the general things that we had kind of already asked them to address, which I guess is the internal affairs situation, right? And then I'm sorry. Yeah, the surveillance technology items, and then.
No, it could be later. I don't I mean, it could be later. I just would like it on the agenda at some point.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just because
Flexible.
yeah, oh, I am. I am so flexible.
Yeah.
The other thing is a question I have, and I don't know if this is something that Mike would address. I don't know how many of you sit on next door Davis and were, came across that lovely outage on Second Street where the lights were out and people called.
Lights?
Yes.
At Second and Mace.
Yes, and where people were going through there and that they didn't put up a stop sign or a flashing light. And people in the dark were going through the intersection because the one on Alhambra looks like it's ahead and people were having difficulties crossing the streets. And there were, I've printed off the stuff because people were calling the police department and wanting to know why there wasn't traffic control. And they were told, number one, that the police can't put up traffic signals on their own, and number two, that they didn't have enough people to manage the intersection. And there were numerous people who indicated they called the police department and were given the same information. The first person talked to the watch commander, he said. And this was quite a big blow up there. There were lots of people very, very upset. And I don't know, as a public safety complaint, if a person would need to come to Mike, or if that's something we should be looking at, what happens in something like this. You know, I tried to explain to my husband, you're right where the city and the county join, and who is one responsible for half the street and the other half? I don't know how that goes, but it was really dangerous. They talked about students getting off the bus and not being able to cross the street because it was so dark and there wasn't a soul around, so.
Mary, just for a point of clarification, was this last Friday evening or was it? Okay. I just want to make sure I have the right incident.
Yeah, the 28th sounds like.
So, this is not to suggest anything about how we, respond to it, but this is another aspect of this that is in as we've explored, Commissioner Sherman and I in the past, is, another thing in the gray area between us and transportation. It's very, very much a transportation safety thing. So is it possible for us to get, I don't know if this would be, I don't know how you wanted us to get this information, but I don't know if this would be best in just sort of a staff report to us in terms of the protocols with regard to how, a power outage for, a major signal or any signal is sort of handled. That would kind of be how I would, at least want to begin that conversation.
How about we have a agenda item where we find out or get information about what the police's responsibility is for that sort of, and how's the coordination with other aspects, traffic safety or public works, whoever handles traffic lights.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
in that
because people
situation,
kept
just-
responding to the police and that they were calling the police and how distressed they were with the response. So that's where I
We
was
can
thinking.
certainly bring back some
I didn't know,
information.
But that was my question.
Yeah.
How
The-
do we-
Yeah.
To explain, the police officers or police department wouldn't be putting up the actual like traffic signals or stop signs or anything like that. They would refer to our public works folks, but they absolutely could or would be out directing traffic and doing having like a manpower or person power of that nature. So I'm not sure exactly what happened last Friday. It sounds like nothing. So
And one said that the person said, no, they can't help, and hung up on them. And they had the sense that they had been getting a lot of calls and were very frustrated by it. So there was a lot of discussion. And so that's why I thought this was an important thing to bring forward, at least to find out where and who might address this issue, because it's.
Put it on the agenda.
Well, I'm just cautious of putting it on the agenda before we know what police's responsibility is. If police's responsibility is 2% of the situation, it doesn't really warrant a whole agenda item.
I
Okay. Okay.
Well, put it on the list as possible.
Thank you. Put it on the list.
Yeah, that specific incident was due to an auto
Auto
accident.
accident on Second, yes.
But let me try to find out. This is the first I'm hearing that there were issues or potentially issues with police response or lack thereof. So let me see what I can find out.
Other items for future agendas? Public comment on long range? Yes.
When I like that, I saw a couple of kids around during the daytime. But that was very, somebody should have known.
Thank you. Other last chance for commissioners in terms of future agenda items. Okay. Oops. Let's see. We'll move to adjourn. Any?
Nope,
Oh,
not
no.
yet. Sorry. So at the last meeting or previous, you guys had talked about an interest in ride-alongs and or tours of the police department. Talked with the chief about that. He's ready to go. So what I'd like to ask for you to do is if you are interested, that there's no requirement to do this, there would not be a meeting to do this. This would be if you were interested in either ride-alongs and or a tour of the police department. If you would just shoot me an email or let me know, then we will work to find times to get those scheduled. For the tours of the police department, it would be in a group of 2 or 3. The chief's preference is to try to get them done all on one day or at least within the same week, just to make it a little bit easier for staff over there. So it'll be a matter of trying to figure out what some available days or times would be based on your availability and interest, and we'll kind of go from there. Again, absolutely no requirement to do this. This is just if you're interested, and maybe you're interested in one, maybe you're interested in both, up to you. Please let me know.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay. After that, now adjournment. Anyone want to make a motion, excuse me, for adjournment of the meeting? Just 3 minutes over. Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? All right, meeting adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care.